Welcome to the Fantasy Aceball podcast. This is your host, Tim Kanak. You can find me on X at Fantasy Aceball, and you can also find this video, if you're watching on the video version, on YouTube at The Tim Kanak. The Tim Kanak, spelled K-A-N-A-K, for those of you who are trying to figure out how the hell you spell Kanak. And if you're watching, you can see with us. You're probably used to listening to this the other way around at this point, but you can see we have Chris Welsh with us on my podcast this time, and you can find him on the X at Is It the Welsh. And Welsh, you're over at Blue Ski too, right? You got a Blue Ski as well.
I got all the stuff. I got what I do on things. I was having a conversation with my wife about this. She loves like pictures, and she's on Facebook, and I was like, "You love Instagram," and she just has tried. She just doesn't get into it, and she's like my age, but she's just like, "This is my old lady thing." She's like, "I think my old lady thing is I don't want to conform to other stuff," and I was like, "I get that." I have everything. I have a TikTok. I've never posted on it. I've got the Blue Sky. I've got Instagram. I'm just a Twitter guy. Like, that's my world. All of my following is on Twitter. It is 98% Twitter. And then it's like, well, then 95%. And then it's a little bit of Instagram. And then I just have the stuff. You got to park on it. You got to park on it, Tim. You got to have the stuff. You got to have the brands.
That's smart. I'm so lazy that I have not done the Blue Ski yet, just because like I like my LinkedIn. I haven't updated my LinkedIn in like 12 years or 15 years or something. There are just so many things. I probably
still have
things. A my face or whatever that. What is that? Is it my face?
Oh, my face. You Belichick? You're like Belichecking it now. You're like, what is this? Face space? Yeah. I mean, I have one. I don't even think they exist anymore. Yeah, it's funny about the LinkedIn because like I updated it one time in the last 8 years, and it was when I transitioned out of radio that I was in, and it was going into being full-time into doing fantasy sports. And as the video people can see behind me, I work at Fantasy Pros, and that was like the last time so that was still like a year ago. I think I did one update, but I don't communicating on LinkedIn. No way. No, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not responding to anybody on LinkedIn. There is just too much stuff. It's just like, give me Twitter.
Overload it. Let's focus. Okay, so obviously we're talking about prospects. You've got Welsh here, you've got me here, and what we're going to be talking about in this podcast is prospects 100 through 150, and we're going to be starting on the back side of this 150 to begin with. And something that we started talking about pre-podcast, Welsh, is like, the further away you get from like your top 10, your top 20, those tiers start getting larger and larger and larger. So you see a lot more movement, and maybe like, it's not like the difference between prospect 10 and 20 is a lot bigger than the difference between prospect 130 and like 145, for example. Like the difference between 130 and 145, it's like, okay, you give or take. If you're in a 25 player range that deep, once you started getting deeper into the prospects, is not as big of a deal as like when you get higher up into the prospect rankings, closer to that number one spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that it's bigger. It's like, I think like my top, I feel really good like on the value of like the top 60, 60-ish, like those guys. It's like, it's just, killer after killer, and it's just, you're just like, here's, what is it? Christian Campbell to Bryce Eldridge. I'm just like literally scrolling. Christian Moore, Zaire Hope, Aiden Miller. You just keep going down. Colson Montgomery, and Angel, and then it starts to change, and then the tiers change. But my point is like, you get to that, like, let's just call it like 65. The tier from 65 to maybe like 125, I think that's pretty close. And then it's like maybe 125 to 250. I think those are generally relatively close. And I know it's like, well, you can't do that. Like, you can't cherry pick like that because you got to have the numbers. It's like, yeah, I think a lot of, especially the range we're talking about, it starts to become about flavor or, what you're going to jump into. There are guys that get really pushed up off of hype and value. There might be some underlying profile data that gets people excited, even though there has been no production. There might be fatigue on players that they're just like, yeah, this guy's kind of boring now, even though, like Luis Baez is like a prime example, just someone else randomly throw out here that I have inside my 100 to 150. And it's like, dude put up like good EVs across the board. Batting average stunk a little bit, but I mean, like 260, you want him to hit higher, but the guys had 20 plus pop, kind of across the board. Young guy, 21 years old with the Houston Astros, if I didn't say that. Like 21-year-old with 20 homers, multiple double-digit stolen bases, and a 260 average. Like, there's still a lot to work with in there. And I don't think there's like insane strikeout problems. But there's this fatigue of like, well, this just doesn't fit. This doesn't fit a mold. And, we want the young up and coming first year player. So like, blah, blah, blah. I could just keep going on. I would say 75 to 200 for a lot of people can be preferences. And some of it is buzz. Some of it is the hope of where they can be. And sometimes just chalky players or players that have had good track records that have some struggles, they just start to tank. Brock Wilken, another example. Guy is insane, crazy, big power. He's going through a lot of big adjustment periods, and people are like, I'm done. I'm done with Brock Wilken. So I struggle with having a preconceived notion on a player and then having smaller sample sizes dictate the complete destruction of a guy, like a Brock Wilken, like a Drew Gilbert. We can kind of keep going through names, even a Tommy Troy. It's like, yeah, I've seen stuff. There might be stuff you don't like, but not building in the progression of a player. We very quick and fast in fantasy, and I get that. And sometimes that's maybe where I fall behind, and maybe why like my ranks in that range can feel a lot wider, and that like I don't think too much. I'm like, oh, I might be 30, 40 spots higher or lower than on a certain player, but it's like I might have the same perception of it. So it's an interesting contrast we all have with ranking.
I think that's a real, yeah. I mean, you mentioned that like 75 to 200 is preferences. That's the word that really stuck with me there when you said that it's preferences. I really feel like that's you hit it right on the head right there. You hit the nail on the head. I think that the preferences that you see in if you're looking at someone's rankings versus another person's rankings, if you look at 1 through 60, it's going to be some of the same guys, whatever. But when you get to like you said, like 75-ish, then you might be seeing some of the character of whoever is ranking those rankings. You might see, oh, okay, this person really cares about proximity, or this person really cares about trying to be the first on some of these Dominican guys or whatever. Or you can see that like, trending, who's trending, who are the hot names, or like, hey, is this guy going to just be a consistent major leaguer? And they're going to be like, they're like kind of a lock to be a starter, but they don't have the upside of some of the other guys. So I think that's really where you see like the character of the ranker, which actually I think makes some of these rankings that we're going to talk about today even more fun with that in mind.
Yeah, and it's a great, like you nailed it exactly what I would have like just thrown in it had you not said it, where it's like Ronnie Mauricio, there's prospect fatigue, but then there's proximity to Yoswar Gonzalez, who was one of the top international picks, or the other guy I'm going at, Elian Pena or Andrew Salas. Like, those guys haven't done anything. But if you want to be in now and you want to have that trajectory upside, like you're going to have to spend a high cost. So I play in leagues with people that it's like they do not care about guys that are 4 or 5 years away. You and I have had these discussions. I'm a little bit more 4 or 5 year away. You're more of a proximity guy, and you will have that happen in drafts where it's like those guys are not even consideration. I want the college bats that are closer, but I also, in the same token, have these guys that they will massively overdraft these young guys to make sure they get them because there is buzz. There's a lot of buzz attached. So, my list isn't always necessarily the best like hype gauge. I do my P180Ps. I think those do a really good job. It's like a top 200 prospect, essentially average draft position. I think those do a decent job of maybe telling the story of like, this is the public perception and the gauge of hype on these players versus like, I'm trying to do my best job of evaluating like where I think the talent is. Sometimes there's like hope of organizational change. Like I have not buried Brock Wilken like we talked about, because it's like that guy has 65, 70 grade power. Like the guy could hit 30 plus homers. He did incredible in college, Wake Forest, like everything was really, and then it's just kind of dissipated. Like he's struggled a little bit in the AFL, but I'm trying to take that talent. I'm trying to judge that talent off of like, I think this is fixable. I think some of these things are fixable. And just because I have like 1 year of data, I don't want to just destroy it. So like, those are all the things that play into these. And I'm like a psychotic mix, I think sometimes, like, cause you couldn't pin me down probably in my 100 to 150. Cause I got young guys that are 4 or 5 years away. I got some guys that I don't want to completely move off of my my notions on them. I got some proximity guys. It's a crazy compilation of all of them, but mine probably is not going to tell you like who are the biggest, buzziest players that everybody is looking for better or for worse.
Yeah, it's more about like the guys that you want to keep an eye on, the guys that you think are still worthy of, like have room to move up, and like, maybe they are dinged a little bit, but they're still hanging around. It's like, it's like they're dinged out of the top 100. Some of these guys maybe, but they're still you're like keeping them like right on the precipice of like, they're still good enough that they can make a comeback with a nice start to the next season.
And I think it's all fluid. I think it's fluid. Like people get very, this, and a lot of people get very worked up about ranks. It's a very like literal system to a lot of people. The problem is you have a lot of people. It's funny because you have like real baseball, like scouty people that either work in organizations or maybe work for like big sites that treat their ranks very serious, and they won't touch them. Like, it's like, this is the rank and we're done for a while until I have reevaluations in 6 months. And then you also have people like, I like to keep it fluid. I'm fluid. I'm open. I'm always I live in Arizona. I'm going to camps. I'm looking for players that have maybe grown into, I'll tell you this. I happened to be around the Mariners last day or two. I saw Ty Pete. Holy crap. Ty Pete has gained 15 to 20 pounds of muscle. He looks jacked. I was shocked, jacked. And I told him, I was like, you spend the whole season lifting? And he laughed, got new tattoos, good spirits. He looks taller, bigger, I would probably guess like 6'3", pushing 200. Like, he looks like an Adonis type of guy. I'm probably going to account for those type of things. Like, I'm out looking for players. I'm looking for intangibles in that entire process. And I want to be fluid with it. I want to flow with trends where I feel it's comfortable. I want to move my ranks sometimes into trends to represent and do people right. But, so I'm not going to necessarily always try to follow the path of wherever, like Jesus Mate is one you've probably already talked about. Like, that's a really tricky one. There's some pitchers that have like skyrocketed up ranks, and it's really fun, but I try to stay fluid, I guess is the best way I'm saying it. Like, I'm open to interpretation, especially when you're outside like the top 75 ranks.
Welsh, wave the water.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if you are watching on the YouTube, which I recommend, you can actually follow along with our rankings. You'll see a nice little spreadsheet where you see my rankings versus Welsh's rankings. So you can actually follow along with the rankings as we're going through these names. If you're a visual learner like me, it can be very useful. Or you could just say, shut up, Tim, I'm working out. I don't care about looking at your thing. I want to lift weights and listen to you guys talk. So we're going to start at number 150, which I marked as red. We got to talk about this. But you did preface your ranking, Welsh, on Aiden Smith, saying that this is a guy that you are going to be moving up, but you currently have Aiden Smith at 150. I am a big Aiden Smith fan. I have him in my top 100. I think, to be exact, I've got him at like 92. So Aiden Smith, let's talk about him real quick. And you already mentioned you're going to move him up. Like, what are your thoughts on Aiden Smith? And like, what do you see that you like that already made you preface like, okay, this is going to be a mover for me?
Yeah, well, I knew like Tim, he can completely confirm this. You didn't say anything. I sent you the list and I literally went, listen, the last two guys are in a movement. My February rank update is going to be happening soon on my Patreon at inthisleague.com. I'm working through that. This is not a part of that public list, but I'm using the public list that's out there right now. But I will also preface this to say that I'm not going to go ballistic. I know there are people that are absolutely in love with Aiden Smith, and there's some pretty good data that is supportive of it. 11 homers, massive stolen bases, 41 stolen bases last year. He hit 288. Very, very, very positive. He just stayed at low A. It's, just something to keep in mind here. And I've seen Aiden Smith because he was a Mariner, and I saw him in his pro debut time where it was I want to say it was like Laz and Michael Arroyo were out here. And I think there's, some good physical representation of the prospect that he can be. I've had some questions about the stolen bases being something that's sticky. I've also had some questions about the batting averages out there. I know there is a lot of good, not public underlying data, I think, that is supportive of people. And I will say that the strikeouts seem to be a really maintained thing. The 52 walks and 87 strikeouts in the Cal League, 77 games with the Mariners. It's impressive. That's impressive to maintain that. So I have to acknowledge, understanding I'm kind of fluid with my ranks in this range, but staring and being like, what is the big difference between Aiden Smith and Henry Bolt? Henry Bolt with the A's. And that's a good question. It's not that big. Yeah, and
better hit tool for Aiden Smith and less Ks.
Okay, but also at super low levels, a full bank of him at A-ball right now. Huge transition from A-ball, rookie ball into the 4As, but also from A-ball to high A. I want to see that transition before anointing. But again, the prospect game is anointing. But I think the proper representation for myself would still warrant you having a red marker and being like, yo, I would probably, and I will in the rank update, have him probably between the 105 and 120 range, somewhere right in there, which is sitting around Henry Bolt, Justin Crawford on the stolen base side, Ryan Waldschmidt with the Arizona Diamondback, in that kind of vicinity, while he's near and touching the Ty Peets, George Lombards, those type of guys. I think he's in that grouping of him. I think there's a lot to be excited about, but like I said, I legit knew as soon as I posted it, I was like, oh yeah, these are big rank updates. Him, and just saying it at 149, I had Demetrio Crisantis with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who I watched in complex ball a lot. And he's a very impressive player with a very impressive hit tool set, lots of contact, not a lot of swing and miss, aggressive steals. He's going to probably hit at the top of the order. I don't know. I don't foresee that or imagine that he's 100% going to be a 2020 guy. I think it might be lower homers, higher batting average, stolen bases. Maybe he's like a Tommy Edman type of player. And that's really good, but I don't think it warranted me making him top 50. But I knew both of those players' ranks were going to stand out to you.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even have Crisantis in my top 150. I thought about putting, and it might have been a mistake. And this is actually one of the guys I really wanted to talk to you about, because I know that you have seen him. I love the batted ball or the plate skills that he's shown so far. Gotta love the speed, but I don't know. For whatever reason, 30. Okay, so for instance, tons of line drives, awesome. But what type of player do you think he's going to be? This is my question about him, because he's second base, first base, right? Is what he's playing right now, and he's 6 foot. 178 pounds, and he's speed, plate skills, and I don't know how good he is defensively, but me just looking at his profile and what he's done, and I haven't seen him in person, mind you, well, you have, but I look at this and I'm like, this reminds me of Ty Black. Is he better than that though? I mean, that's I looked at him and I was like, I don't want to fall back into the Black trap, because I was pretty high on Black, and then I was like, wait, he's actually really bad defensively, and he doesn't really have a home position because he doesn't have enough power to be a really good first baseman. So I don't what's going to happen with him. What do you think? Can he actually play defense unlike Black?
That's a really interesting comp. I was never a Tyler Black guy. That was always one where I differed from. I watched him in the fall league, watched him some in some of the camps out here with the Brewers. I was never in love with Tyler Black. I do think there is a difference. I think he is going to be a much more polished hitter. I think that Crisantis has the makings of being a number 1 or number 2 hitter. He's super aggressive on the base paths, not striking out currently at lower levels, hitting tons of contact. I'm not worried about guys that are driving the ball. Line drive, low home run output doesn't mean a whole lot to me at the lower levels. I'm looking for high contact skills with low strikeout risk, and I think he does that, and that's why you can be excited about him. But I just have more major questions about what that power output's going to look like. So like, to me, the high end, as I said, like maybe like Tommy Edman, like maybe he could be like a Tommy Edman type of dude, which I think is pretty exciting. But, on the lower ends, and I don't even know if this is lower end actually, now that I'm saying it, but like, like I guess this is another high end, like Bryson Stott, like another one of those guys, but like maybe it's only 10 to 12 home run power. And like, what does that do for you? And if he does steal a little bit less, and then what if he becomes a more prototypical number 9? Like he does have some of the trappings of maybe a future util type of player. Maybe he's not defensively great enough to hold down a spot, but positionally he can move around the field in the infield. And then he's John Birdie and something like that. So those things are all out there. But I think early on the plate skills, we're banking on that. That again, like, I don't know where I stand amongst people. I've heard some people be like, he's just absolute no-brainer top 100. Like, yeah, maybe. Like this year's probably going to tell us a lot. He just hit 340. If he comes out the gates and they push him to high A, and then all of a sudden he's hitting 300 again, and maybe the ball is flying a little bit more, low strikeouts. It's like, oh, dude, he carried it over. And maybe the ball's flying a little bit more. Now we have to rethink, and now he's like a 2020 guy. So those are all the things that are kind of swirling around. But again, it's such a weird battle between people. I think there's a lot of people that would be like, yo, Crisantis hands down over Tamar Johnson. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like Tamar Johnson has these loud skills, loud power potential. He can steal. We've seen the batting average dip, but then we're in this weird period, like in the AFL, dude needs to get the bat off of his shoulder. Like he's just taking too many early pitches, and that's putting him in holes, but he's got these really loud skills. It's like, I think the hype and the excitement of Crisantis versus the fatigue of everybody knowing what they have out of Termar makes those guys go in opposite directions. And I don't know. I'm not quite there.
Yeah, I get that. I probably should have him higher. I have him like right on the edge, but like, I don't know. That just scared me when I thought about Tyler Black, because I definitely had Black like too high originally, and I didn't want to get like overly excited about someone who maybe has like a lower ceiling because of, limitations like size and power limitations and maybe some defensive limitations.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of what I ran into at the beginning.
I don't think he has the position limitations as much, by the way, as Black.
That's why I wanted to ask you, because you've actually seen him besides just like highlights. Like I haven't seen him in person.
Yeah.
And then if you're just watching highlights, like, yeah. But Aiden Smith, I wanted to highlight this real quick. 33 doubles in 97 games. So dude is kind of like on that DeLauder kick of just like a double every 3 games, which is one of the reasons I really like Aiden Smith as well, is just the doubles profile. And also both of these guys actually that we're talking about do not hit the ball on the ground very much, which I love from young hitter. Like both of them are like 35% ground ball rate guys, which I love, which maybe with the speed guys, you actually maybe want them to hit the ball on the ground a little more. But like with Crisantis, it's like a 27% line drive rate, which is awesome. So like, don't change that. I think whatever's working is working. My 150, I have Gavin Cross. I'm actually back in on Cross a little bit. He had kind of an underrated season, Welsh, where he had 15 homers and 30 steals in 101 games. And like, he's pretty close. So this is like a proximity type 2. He's 24 now. He's a AA all last year. The Royals outfield isn't that great. Like, I think they still have Aceball hanging around. I mean, like, I think that Cross is a guy who could actually like get some reps in the majors this year, and there's a chance for it. And so I just wanted to throw him like on the back of my list, because I'm like, hey, remember this guy? He's still alive and actually had a decent 2024. And if you're in a redraft league, or you need a proximity type play and you don't want to wait 4 years for a guy, this might be a name to watch out for, that he actually had a decent kind of like comeback season last year. So that's why he made my list as like the final guy. Just throwing that back out there. And then my next one is Sammy Stafura. I like Stafura a lot. Obviously only Aceball. I actually saw him live this year. Was pretty exciting player. The one thing with Stafura that I don't really like is his EVs are really pretty crappy. Like, he had 8 home runs this year in Florida League, which is actually pretty good for someone that only had a 104 max EV. So I don't know where he's going to be as a power guy. But I think that, there's enough there that he could end up a pretty good player. 15% walk rate too at Aceball.
Yeah. I saw him, and I talked to him a couple of times when he was out here in Complex, and he did, I want to say he was like here for, maybe it was extended spring training a little bit, but he played in rookie ball, and then he came back and he was here for just like a short stint playing rookie ball, and he had gained significant muscle. Like it was, you could see it from a mile away that it was like this skinnier guy whose hit tool did not live up to it. He came into this past season, looked, 10 to 15 pounds more bulky. He was talking about that, very, very confident. That led me to a little bit more power projection, but the bat is still trending. Like it was trending behind, I think, what some of the earlier expectations are. But yeah, I agree with you. I like him. The funny thing is a newer version of him, and I don't know if you've talked about him, is like Tyson Lewis. Like Tyson Lewis, who they just drafted, is a monster. That guy reminds me, I've likened him to Cooper Pratt with the Brewers, where every single time went out and saw Tyson Lewis in rookie ball this year for me, he got a hit. And that's what Cooper Pratt did to me. I was like, Jesus, every time I saw Cooper Pratt, it was just like line drive, steal some bases. Tyson Lewis, probably even a better athlete. So he's a guy that's on like the high rise. In my rank update, you're going to see a much, much higher rank on Tyson Lewis, but he's like a guy that's trending even more up. And it's just funny because he's overtaken Stafura, but the hope is Stafura could, maybe at some point be like a 2020 guy.
Yeah, for sure. 148, you have Will Warren, who I have like just outside. I think a part of that is like he's older and it's potential bullpen use for the Yankees here. So I don't know if he's going to be one of these like Michael King types who just gets stuck in the pen for a couple of years and then finally breaks out as a starter, like for the Padres or I don't know, some other team or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But that's what I think. I think he's just like bullpen track right now, but I do like him. I have Slade Caldwell here. You are quite a bit higher on Slade Caldwell. And I'll tell you, I've been releasing my FYPD rankings on the Twitter X machine lately. And I had Caldwell, I don't know, what did I have him off the top of my head? I can't remember. I did the top 25, and I think I had him at like 18 or 19 or something like that. And I had people saying, oh, he's too small. Why do you have him that high? I want you to give a shout here because you actually have Caldwell all the way, as you see me scrolling up here, at number 102. So you've got him at 102, and I've got him at 148 here. So let's give Slade Caldwell a little bit of a shout out here, Welsh.
I mean, they're not wrong. Like he is a tiny guy. I mean, I would say if there's an organization that has built their bricks around a player like that, it's the Arizona Diamondbacks. Like you look at Slade Caldwell, you're like Diamondback, under 6 foot outfielder, but tons and tons of contact, big bat speed, also a thicker guy. He's like a smaller guy, but this isn't, Corbin Carroll, to me, faced a lot more physical restrictions early on in his career, at least from an eye test. If you'd never watched him, people would have looked at him and I remember I had this debate with Scott White before Corbin Carroll was a guy. Everyone would look at him and go, where's the power going to come from? Where are we going to see the power from Corbin Carroll? Skinny, rail thin, under 5, I think it was like 5'11", 5'10". Like, yeah, he hits the ball, but is he ever, what we saw out of Corbin Carroll, one of the fastest bats in baseball, optimized swing. He's barreling up the ball at all costs. He had generated everything to go, and he wasn't a big, thick guy. Now, Slade is a thicker outfield. He's a thicker dude who also might even be a little bit shorter than 5'9". But again, good bat speed, really good bat. I think there's 100% power potential in an organization that has not only like is going to put him in hitter friendly environments, but it's a hitter friendly major league environment. He can steal bases. He gets on base. He's a stud. He's now physical limitations. Yeah. I don't know if he's ever going to be cracking like a top 50 unless he just is putting up 2020 seasons, hitting 330 and stuff. Like he's gonna have to have Christian Campbell type seasons to kind of overcome that. But does he not? I think like the game attributes, not the physical attributes, is what I was working through. The game attributes are going to be something at the end of the day where we're like, oh yeah, he's, stealing, 25 bases. He's hitting 18 homers. He's hitting, 290 across 2 levels. Like we're going to go back and look. Now I will say, I know like James Anderson likes Ryan Waldschmidt, who the Diamondbacks took a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But I'd say Slade is pretty chalky inside the top 20 of first-year player. Again, I don't think a lot of people get hyper-focused, maybe the upside, but don't get hyper-focused on like Slade Caldwell's size, limiting him to being a nothing. There's a reason he was a first-rounder.
Yeah, I actually like Waldschmidt better too, so I'm on the same page there. But Caldwell, I liken him to like Sal Frelick or like Stephen Kwan type player. It's interesting that you think he might hit for a little more power because I think his hit tool is sick. And he definitely has some speed, but if he can contribute 15 homers instead of 8 homers or 10 homers or whatever, he's definitely going to be a lot more fantasy viable. So if he can develop like mid-teens power, I don't think we're looking at a 20 homer guy, but if he can develop mid-teens power, that makes him a bit more interesting in my mind.
And it's interesting comps you put out. Just real quick. Lastly, you put out of those other guys. Slade is he's a thicker, bigger guy. Like then Quan. Who was the first one you said? It was Quan
Frelick.
and who? And Frelick. Sal Frelick. This is a tinier guy. I've seen a ton of him. From a body mass standpoint, there's a lot more body mass in Slade Caldwell with that big bat speed. He's getting the ball up in the air. Like, we're going to have to see. Like, unfortunately, the thing that was taken away from us is we did not have rookie ball that extended past the draft. So the only stuff we got to see was guys like me that were able to go to the Bridge League and see like that. I talked about Braylon Payne a ton for everybody with the Brewers because I saw him a ton, but there was no physical stats for anybody to judge off of. Diamondbacks were a lot tougher to get into Bridge League, and I never did. So we're going to have to see what this first full season looks like.
Yeah, exactly. 147, you have Edgar Caro. I have Chase Davis. I put a little red flag here because I've got Caro, I think, at like 89 or 90 or something like that in my rankings. So I'm a bit higher on him. I think a part of that is like, I think you naturally will rank catchers lower than I will.
100%.
Part of that, I guess, might be just depending on what type of league you play in, right? If you're in a 2-catcher league, if you're in a 2-catcher dynasty league, you probably need to pay more attention to catchers. If you're in a 1-catcher dynasty league, it's like, who cares? You pay attention to your Sammy Basayo, and then everyone else can go kick rocks. I think it probably depends kind of like on what type of league you're in. But I think that's probably the spacing there is just, how high you want to rank X amount of catchers more than anything. Because I think he's going to end up, he's definitely been age to level, like very, very good. He'll probably, this is what I want to throw you real quick on him. Who do you think is up first, Caro or Teal, now that the White Sox have both of those catchers? And how are they going to approach this situation of having two like top prospect catchers? Are they going to just do like 50-50 split, or do you think Teal is destined to start playing other positions as maybe the more athletic guy? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
I guess my gut would say that I feel like Caro would be more of the primary catcher, but Teal is more of the offensive piece, even though Caro just hit 280 and solid homers and everything like that. Caro's already out here. He is out here. I can't confirm Teal, but I know for 100% fact, Caro is out here working with the pitchers. Hagen is already reported to White Sox camp, as has Noah Schultz. Like, these guys are here. Caro is here, one of the last guys out at camps and stuff like that. I just tend to think that maybe Caro is more of the traditional catcher. Maybe they move Teal around. That would still make me like Teal more, to be honest with you. More positional spots. But yeah, I rank catchers generally lower in fantasy, and I think Caro's a fine catcher. I don't think he's elite, though I will say this past season, also like physically, like from a body standpoint, he really is improving, but he did put up a really solid season, 280 with 16 homers. But that would be my guess as he went to AAA, is maybe Caro has a lot more familiarity with this pitching staff as well, that he might be the first guy and he might be a little bit more the primary.
Yeah, that makes sense. At 146, you have Enrique Bradfield Jr. I like his speed. He's an interesting name for sure. I have Jimmy Crooks, another catcher to talk about, Cardinals catcher, who I like. I don't know what's going to happen because the Cardinals have so many catchers right now in the organization. It seems like that they're moving Contreras to first base even. So I don't know, is Herrera going to start playing third base so that they can get Jimmy Crooks in? I don't know what they're going to do at this point. But I really like Jimmy Crooks. Good bat. You have anything on these two guys?
Yeah, I've watched Jimmy Crooks in the AFL. I wonder if he could even, potentially move around. Enrique Bradfield is just an elite stolen base potential. Bat looks like it's relatively solid. There's a couple of these guys. Everyone's very excited about Chandler Simpson this year. If you're excited about Chandler Simpson, you can maybe pay attention to Enrique Bradfield. So yeah, I think both these guys are fine.
Next 145, you have George Walco, and I have Zach Veen back in the top 150 now after a decent season. That is a risky one, but I think, when you take that kind of speed in cores at this point, this deep, it's probably worth a gamble if you're drafting based on some rankings, going for a guy like Zach Veen just to see what happens. What are your thoughts? Is Veen, is he still going to be a major league player? Like, where do you have Veen right now? And then if you want to talk about Walco real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn on Veen. I got really high into Veen and just seeing like the way he was making contact, the wildly aggressive base stealer that he is. But he really does struggle with like max EV. He's been tons of injuries. I remember watching him in spring training before, the season kind of ended out. Just even in BP, he wasn't getting anything out of the ballpark. So I start and kind of coming to terms with like, I don't even know if there's ever going to be impactful power. I do think he's one of the most aggressive base stealers I've ever seen. The hit tool, it's tough to see just because of the injuries. I have him right outside the 150, not too far though. And Wolko, I think, is a freaking beast. He looks already bigger than he has before. Going to generate insane power, really, really good athlete. He's probably one of the most physically imposing outfielders probably out there right now in the minor leagues. And he's making big progressions. And like I said, I just saw him recently. He looks even bigger than he did, 4 months ago at the end of the year. So pretty big on George Wolko.
Awesome. Next, we've got Tommy Troy and Bryce Matthews. I was so high on Tommy Troy when he first came up, when he's first drafted, but like last year was such a disappointing season. And then Bryce Matthews and Tommy Troy, actually, I think Tommy Troy, like if you were just to blind test this, I would tell you that, Tommy Troy's the better hitter between these two, because Bryce Matthews' bat is just kind of like, he's more like a skills, just toolsed up guy who can hit or miss. But if you look at their seasons, it's like the opposite. Like Troy looked like just completely lost, whereas like Matthews had like a really strong season. And where do you have Matthews, by the way? Do you have Matthews in your top 100? I didn't even see him in your 150 here. But
no, I've got him a little bit outside the top 150.
Okay.
I have Gino Groover, actually, another Diamondback there. It's funny. Gino Groover, Bryce Matthews, Tommy Troy, all part of kind of analytical approach. Guys that, put up just like really good 90th percentile EVs. Just generally barreling the ball in college. Like that's what Gino was. That's what Bryce Matthews was. I remember I talked to Corbin Carroll about that in that draft class, where it was like they took a very analytics approach of looking at batted ball data and kind of targeting some of those guys. Tommy hasn't been great though. Like, that's 100%. Like Tommy has not in the AFL. He looked okay. I wonder if he's still trying to figure out the type of hitter that he is. He stole more bases this past year, but he only hit 234. He's funny, kind of eccentric dude. He's always locking in. He'd always say in the AFL, got to lock in and get going. He didn't find that consistency. I do feel like he's a guy that when it clicks, it's getting to go, but I'm not sold 100% that he's going to be better than a 250 hitter anymore. But I do think if it clicks, the tools are there. I don't want to quite give up on him, but I think this is a very, very important year coming out the AFL. You need to see big batting average improvements. He's only gotten to high A. We got to push him to triple A. I don't want to call anything a make or break, but like this will be the difference between me tanking his value and keeping him up.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Bryce Matthews, by the way, if you don't know, he's got a little bit of an Edouard Julien syndrome, where he had a 53.6% zone swing rate while he still had almost an 85% zone contact. So he's making contact in the zone, but he's just not swinging enough. And that's why if you see that K rate, it's just watching way too many pitchers go by. So if he can get more aggressive on those pitches in the zone, I think we're going to see a better profile from him overall. So just something that I think he should work on. Next, we have at 143, Jace Young. And you see, I actually have Jace Young at 142. So we're like right there on, right in the same spot there. And then 142, you have Theo Gillen. I've got Gillen. He was my 151. So he was right there. So a couple guys that we have pretty close here, and Jace Young and Theo Gillen here in our rankings. You got anything on those two guys?
I mean, I'm not really sure Jace is ever going to hit for big impactful power. Another AFL guy that I saw a ton of. I'm not in the big world of Theo Gillen as everybody else. I like some first year player guys, even a little bit more. In Gillen, honestly, has been one of those guys that, I don't know, starts to track down a little bit for me, maybe my interest. He's one of those guys, I would be completely honest, in drafts, I'm comfortable pivoting. Like if I had a second round pick and it's like, oh, Theo Gillen's there, or it's like, oh, you could take Elian Pena, who just signed with the Mets. Like I might go with the future high upside. I'm not like enamored with Gillen.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, my comp for him, a smaller Parker Meadows. I don't know if you like that or not, but
that's interesting.
That's where I think he's going to be kind of at. So you might see that hit tool kind of come and go a little bit like Meadows has. Ian Seymour, I have in the mix here. Seymour is more like just a super proximity guy. I think he could be like a decent number 4, number 5 starter or something like that if he got the chance. He has not a good fastball, pretty good breaking stuff though, good control. So it's just a guy that if you need a pitcher at the end of the season, he's probably a guy who will play for the Rays. He's 26. He had really good stats last year, really good swinging strike rate, 15.2% through double and triple A. So just an interesting name for more like proximity purposes than anything else, which, again, the character between the guys here. You have next as your next pitcher at 141, Emiliano Teodo, who I also have. I think I have him up at like 110, 111. So I'm a little bit higher on Teodo. I understand why you would push him down a little bit because he might be a reliever here. Is that what you're thinking on Teodo? Do you think he's just a reliever long term?
In my rank update, I have him a little bit higher, but that's always been my concern. To his credit, though, 1.9 ERA this past year with 110 strikeouts, and it didn't blow up into like some crazy, insane walk he still walked 50 in 86 innings. But he's an electric arm that I think could be a closer tomorrow. And if anybody ever listened, I did the interview on Fantasy Baseball Today. Me and Frank, I brought on James Triantos. And, Triantos squirmed in his chair when I brought up Teodo because it's like, dude's throwing 102 with crazy movement. Like, he's nuts. He's a nuts reliever, but he dials it down as a starter as you normally would. But he saw great results. So this is a common practice for teams. You don't want to just let him stretch this out. Let's see how he is as a starter. The difference is like, there's something in the water right now. Alejandro Rosario has been good. They fixed Rocker. Teodo, I mean, he met all calls of what you could hope for, a 1.98 ERA and 86 innings pitch. They're going to let him thrive more. So I think he's ticking up and up. I still think he's pretty valuable as a closer. But I do have some questions as far as like, what's the season going to look like? The full pitch repertoire. It's tough no matter what for anybody to hit a guy that's, going triple digits at any time with also just, throwing slider. I think it's a slider right on the inside and throwing it for strikes. Like, that's what's crazy about him. So if he maintains even into like a third pitch and starts walking a little bit less, then we're talking about like sky's the limit.
Yeah. Get Jack Leiters from that water.
Please. He's the only one.
Yeah. 141. I've got Braylon Morelli. You've probably seen him in person, right? I'm interested to hear what you think about him because his numbers are ridiculous. In complex last year, he had almost a 300 ISO, 7 bombs and 12 steals in 41 games. Like, just a super athlete. Like, I like what I see. Obviously tons of Ks, though, 20% swing strike rate. But what do you think about Morel?
I had this discussion with Eric Cross. I'm not as big on Morel as anybody else watching him because it was a super talented team. Pablo Guerrero, Vladimir Guerrero's son, was on that team. His kid, Yermi Cabrera, who I'm absolutely in love with. I think he's a stud. They had all these studs. Morel was probably the least of any of those guys. He did some great stuff. He hit over 300 against both righties and lefties, but 26 of his 32 extra base hits came off of righties last year. So I'm worried there might be some split issues with him. I don't know. Athletically, I'm not as impressed. I never walked away thinking like, man, this guy is an absolute stud. I felt there were some times of, I'm loosely talking about too, like not running out stuff, maybe not kind of fully being into it. To his credit, like he definitely did some great stuff, but I was more impressed with Yermi Cabrera there. So I am not in the Morel camp. But again, this year I think is going to tell a really big story. I just think it might come apart a little bit.
I like Cabrera too. So next we have some pitchers at 140. You have Matt Wilkinson, Tugboat, and I have Trey Yesavage. At 139, you have Chase Hampton, who might get some run this year. It's about time. He was hurt last year. I thought it might have happened last year for him. I have Owen Murphy at 139, who I don't even care that he's got Tommy John Welsh. That fastball is so good that I could not resist keeping in my top 150. And then 138, more pitchers. You have Logan Henderson, who I had to red mark this one because I'm quite a bit higher on Logan Henderson than you. And then Connor Prelip I have, who came back from Tommy John and looked fantastic in his short little stint last year.
That's good.
Anything on any of these pitchers here?
Well, Logan, I think that's good. I thought you might have marked it because you weren't in on him. I think there's a general sense too that needs to be discussed. You were higher in pitchers than I am. I'm not as high in pitcher. I think there are these giant clumps of great pitchers where people will be like, I'm putting my stamp down on Brandon Sprott. Okay, cool. There are so many great pitchers that I want the best value. So if somebody pushes up an Alejandro Rosario, or they push up a Logan Henderson or a Jaden Ham, it's probably going to push me out of it. But then if you're going to then give me deals on, maybe Tugboat, I like Hunter Renfroe, Travis Savage, just stuff like that. Cam Caminiti, people just don't seem to be in Cam Caminiti because he's a high school pitcher. I want the values on pitching. So my rankings are relatively low. But to your point, I'm with you. I love Logan Henderson. I've seen him a couple times. Love that fastball. Attacks the zone a ton. Very impressive outing. I watched him in his rehab, and it shows. He struck out 104 and walked 15 this past year. He is an absolute bulldog on the mound with a really good fastball. I love Logan Henderson. So you having him higher, I'm with you. I actually just thought it was going to be you didn't have him in the top 150, but I'm a Logan Henderson guy.
I've got Henderson at 86.
Okay, and that's big.
Yeah, and he was at AAA, so he's also proximity boost. So not only you got a little proximity boost too. I threw him into my F scores, and he rated above average in stuff control and in run prevention. So like this is one of the dudes who really lit up my F scores for like a guy who could actually make a nice transition from AAA to the majors this year. Like, I think this guy could be good. Like right when he hits the majors, like he could be putting up very good numbers. Yeah. And I don't know, like, is he the next guy up for the Brewers? Because the thing is this. They have Mizurowski too, but is Mizurowski going to come up in a relief role, which would then open up if they need a starter for that starter to be Logan Henderson? Any thoughts on that real quick?
Yeah, I wish I had the answer to that. I do think that Mizurowski is leaning more towards relief. I'm hopeful that it is, and I have to imagine it is going to be Logan Henderson, because even looking in the pipeline, I just don't see anybody that there's obviously opportunities. Casey Hunt is like a really interesting guy, but I think Logan Henderson would like be the dude that they would throw out there. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity for him.
Yeah. And by the way, real quick on Connor Prelip, because I don't hear anybody ever talking about him and his little comeback last year in 23 innings, he had a 37.4 K- walk rate, a 24.2 swinging strike rate, and a 38.2 CSW. So dude was absolute fire in his little comeback. I know it's only 23 innings, but just came back from TJ and lit it up. And he's 24, so they might just move him quick through the Twins org, and they're pretty good at pitching development too. 137. You and I have Blake Mitchell right next to each other. I've got him at 136. Oh, yeah. You've got him at 137. So I put a little green arrow there because we've got those two dudes, or that dude, right next to each other in two spots here. So Blake Mitchell, big time power for a catcher. Right. The thing that's going to be interesting for the Royals is that they're like the catching org, right? Like I talked about the Cardinals a second ago, but you've got the Royals with Salvi and Fermin and MJ Melendez came up as a catcher. And now
Carter Jensen
coming up and Blake Mitchell. So it's like just all these catchers flying up. They're going to have I think their goal is to field a team with all catchers except for the pitcher. Just like every position will be, besides Bobby Witt, is going to be a former catcher at some point, and then you're going to have the pitcher on the field.
Probably. That's funny too, because it's like all these teams, it's like you have a team of shortstops that are playing across the board. This is the only one where it's just, nope, nothing but catchers.
Yeah.
They need to sign Kenley Jansen too. That'll just fit the mold there as a former catcher turned relief pitcher.
Yep. So at 137, I've got AJ Smith-Shawver, where you have Mitchell. 136, interesting name. You have Roderick Arias, where I have Blake Mitchell. And I think you remember my thoughts on Roderick Arias. I saw him twice this last year, and he was absolutely horrendous both times I saw him, just swinging at everything. And like he made hard contact when he hit it, but the dude was just swinging it friggin' everything. So I cannot be in on Roderick Arias, but I'll hear you say something about him if you want to.
Well, I'm not going to go nuts about it. I don't have him inside the top 100, but 20-year-old in the Yankee system who just had 13 homers and 37 stolen bases. Batting average stunk. Strikeouts are a massive, massive problem, but the counting stats are really loud. So that's the thing I want to pay attention to. He also walked 68 times. So right now you've got this young guy that's in kind of like a 3-outcome situation. It's like impactful hits, walks, or strikeouts. Like, it's pretty extreme in that. And it's almost 70 walks he had with 170 strikeouts. So I kind of want to play it out and see where it is. But if you're talking about loud tools, I think there's some really, really loud tools in Roderick Arias. And I think there's some pretty good batted ball data that is supportive, but he's got to, the plate discipline's got to improve. He's got to find a way to do. And Jason Dominguez is an example of a player that had some really bad lower level batting average stuff, strikeout issues that started to progress. So I guess I'm still banking on the potential that they're going to fix that.
Yeah, you need George Lombard to teach him a little bit.
Yeah,
they're on the same team. 135. You've got Jefferson Rojas. I had him right outside of my top 150. I feel like he didn't put up a strong enough season for me to rank him higher. Sal Stewart, I have at 135. You have Sal Stewart higher. I've seen Sal Stewart live a couple times. I was actually really impressed by him. I just think that like he's going to be kind of a boring guy. Like I like it. Like I think he's a really good hitter, but I think he's going to be like a 280 guy who hits 20 homers, no steals or like one steal, and it's just kind of boringly good. So like that's why it's hard for me to rank him higher. Is I think he's like a lock for the majors. Like he's a really good hitter.
I think there's a Strand. I think like Strand. I don't necessarily disagree. He's kind of a funny dude. I saw him rehabbing in during Instructs when he was playing some games. Matt McClain was out there, Strand was out there, and Sal Stewart was kind of rehabbing. He's very funny, interesting personality, loves to talk, really smart hitter. I think he could progress even more, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a Strandness type of guy in him. So he's just outside the top 100 for me. I think some people have him higher. I dig it. I think they got a couple of those guys. I mean, not necessarily jumping ahead, but a guy like Cam Collier is another one of those that has just flown up for a lot of people because of I think some underlying data. It's very funny to me with the Collier stuff too, because it's like Collier has always been one of the youngest. I mean, the guy reclassified into the draft, and then there's something that clicked where someone was like, oh yeah, he hits the ball hard. He just hit 20 homers with a bad average, but he's only 20 and it can keep going. It's like, that was always the case. Like, there was actually a really good bat that was in there, but he only hit 246 in 2023. But the only thing that changed was just more power. So I find it interesting that Collier has like skyrocketed up the world for a lot of people, when I do feel like it's kind of the same guy. There's always been like physical issues that people have worried about. I just saw him 2 weeks ago at the Dream Series where his dad was coaching, and he was walking, him and Marquise Grissom Jr. were just walking around the whole time. And like, it looks like he's improving his body and stuff like that. It's not getting into a horrible space, but it's like, I don't know. This seems like the same Cam Collier. And I feel like people are seeing a different version of Cam Collier than I saw before and that I'm seeing now. It's interesting.
Yeah. I have him still outside of my top 150. So I might be the low guy on him, but I just get like some Davison De Los Santos vibes from him.
I like Davison De Los Santos still. So
I like Davison too. I just think I get a little bit of those Davison and Orelvis type vibes from him. So I don't know. I think there's some more exciting players like 134. I have Yeremy Cabrera, your boy, who you already mentioned. And then you have Robbie Snelling at 134. And we've got Snelling right next to each other. I've got Snelling just a couple spots higher. And it's funny, too, because we also have AJ Smith-Shawver really close together. So you have AJ Smith-Shawver next, and then I have him right below. So we've got Snelling and Shawver like both right kind of next to each other here. Snelling was so much better with the Marlins. Do you think that's something that can continue?
Yeah, that's what I'm hopeful for. I just think he's a beast. I loved him. I talked to him a bunch when he was a Padre, fellow 49er fan, me and him. And like, I thought he had an insane 2023, and it all just really fell apart. But I think he's a bulldog out there. I think you're going to get higher strikeout potential. And he did seem to pick it back up in the second half. I mean, he had 16 innings pitched in September where he had a 2 ERA. July, he had a 3.5 ERA. He just had this really bad bump. June specifically, in 4 starts, he had almost 10 ERA. That I think Robbie Snelling is going to get back on the scene for a lot of people. That's why I wanted to keep him. He's one of those guys that a lot of people are like, nope, done with. I didn't want to have half of a season kind of dictate him being absolutely nothing. But from a trendy standpoint, he's not a trendy guy. And you're probably never going to get for value if you were trading him away. Like, you're not going to get a top 150. People are kind of done. I'd buy him for dirt cheap, though.
Yeah, for sure. 20.3 came on his walk rate when he came over to the Marlins. So significantly better when he moved to the other side of the country. Yafri Rodriguez, Besides sounding like a Game of Thrones character, what else can you tell me about Joffrey Rodriguez?
Oh, Joffrey Rodriguez. He's a funny dude too. He's with the Brewers this past season, high A, 250, 7 homers, 7 stolen bases. He had played in the Dominican Summer League the year prior to that. You had another like good set, 52 games, 6 homers, 12 stolen bases. He walked more than he struck out. This past year, still kept it around ish, like the 25 percentile of strikeouts, but he walked a ton. He walked almost 60 times in 110 games. Good physical projection. I think there's a 2020 guy in Joffrey. If he progresses, this will be a big important year because last year was his first stateside. And by the way, he skipped rookie ball. That's another thing to understand. He didn't go to complex. He played in the Dominican Summer League in 2023 and then jumped straight to Aceball this past year. Kind of what they've done with some of their young guys, skipping rookie ball altogether. So that's a big challenge and adjustment. But he's got 2020 potential in him. 7 homers, 7 stolen bases in 110 games. Look for maybe a jump in that. 15 homers, 15 stolen bases this year. And if he hits for more average, look out.
See, I believe in the power. He had 23 doubles and 6 triples too on top of that. So I believe in that power developing. But what gets me is the speed. Because when I was looking at him, I was like, man, he had 19 steals and 12 caught stealings between the 2 levels that he's played at so far in the minors. And I'm like, he just like does he like not know how to run the bases?
I think that's some poor base stealing. That's just, yeah, I'm not sure that's a speed related thing than it is to like poor base stealing. So you hope that's going to change. But yeah, that is worrisome.
Yeah. Next one, 131. You have Michael Arroyo. I have Jaden Ham here. I had to call, you have Jaden Ham right next to it. You're like just slightly higher on Jaden Ham. So we're pretty close on him. But I put the red flag here for Michael Arroyo because Welsh, I have Michael Arroyo as my number 41 ranked player. Why do you hate Michael Arroyo?
I love Michael Arroyo. He's like the nicest dude. Again, this is unfortunately one of those dudes where I sit here and I'm like, by the way, I've seen him a ton and he does make a lot of contact. He's kind of done that pretty consistently. He's put up some big, loud tools. He is a guy that is higher in my next rank update, but it is still not in your same general range. He had 23 homers this past year, 18 stolen bases. He progressed in his batting average, which is really good to see. And he kind of met the call at high A. I think to me, it's one of those, he's trending into pushing into kind of being like a top 50 guy. I just want to kind of repoint out the variance between like, you know, if I were to slide him to, let's just say 75, I really don't think there's like an insanely dramatic, maybe 85 is a better representation but still, even to that point, like putting him near Eduardo Quintero, Yolene Cespedes, George Lombard, I think he does kind of belong in that general vicinity. I just numerically did have him a little bit lower, but he is higher in the next rank update. But it's not where you're at. Like you definitely you're the Michael Arroyo guy. And I think I will be wrong and proven dumb with my rank if he repeats what he did this past year, whereas hitting for more average, having a big significant home run jump, also stealing bases. If he does that, okay. If he cuts down the strikeouts, I think that's going to be a big important thing. But hell, dude, yeah. The more I look at it, I'm like, yeah, I think it is wrong because it's 400. He's at 3 straight seasons of a 400 OBP. It is pretty impressive. Michael Rowe, he's just like a super nice dude, by the way. I just want to throw that out as well.
56 extra base hits too, 23 bombs, 18 steals, so almost 2020 here. And he was at high A last year as a 19-year-old. He made it up to high A. So he was a couple of years young for the level even. I think the average age of high A is 21 or 22. It's like right there. So yeah. I think he was a little young for the level too on top of it. But yeah, I like him a lot. I think one of the things too, that when I'm writing the articles for Fantasy Pros every single week about who was good this week, and I see his name every single week, when I see consistency like that, that makes me buy what that player is doing a lot more. Because literally every week he's like on that. Every time I'm writing that article on Fantasy Pros, he's on that list of, oh, another good week from Michael Arroyo. And I would rather be buying a player that is very good week after week after week after week than a guy who is, fire for 1 week and then sucks for 2 weeks and then is fire again for 1 week and then sucks for 2 weeks. That consistency is just something that I feel like is really important for a baseball player. And that just shows me, I think he's a guy who's going to make it. You know, I
think it's a really good point. And like, I'm much happier with what the rank I was going to publish, but you are kind of pressing me to think, and something that's always been super beneficial to me that I don't do sometimes, especially when I'm just, sitting here for hours and hours and doing my ranks and watching video, is when you start to have like full-on comparisons of players and you sit down and you're just like, all right, well, I'll just pick a random player. I'll be like, let me take a look and see Eduardo Quintero versus Michael Arroyo, or Yo Hendry, or even push farther, Aniel Yanoa with the Guardians. Let me start looking at some comparisons and find those differences. And then you can kind of come to terms with this fluidity of ranks. Because again, like I feel different about the player based on the rank, but like reading that and I look and it's even at 100, it's like you said, like, why do you hate him? Why do you hate him? We do that all the time with ranks. And it's like, I don't hate him, but it's like, yeah, maybe I'm underrating him a decent amount. It's a good point. And the consistency I love. Like I love high contact batted profiles, love guys that aren't striking out, love walks, but also love guys doing it consistently and not having these like up and down floating, like two bad months and then one really great month and then an okay month. Like I'm with you.
Well, that's why you had CJ Kavas at 130, because again, he's a super consistent hitter, really good hitter. I had him right outside of my top 150 because again, like, I don't know, like there's something with me and like corner infielders where I just like don't want to like first baseman, especially.
Well, a lot of classic scouting don't like first baseman. First baseman, it's a tough transition, like fantasy to real scouting and stuff like that.
Especially in that org, because like we saw like the Guardians just had to trade Naylor to maybe make room for Manzardo, and then they signed Carlos Santana the next day. So it's like, who knows, like what, like CJ Kavas is a first baseman, so he's going to be blocked by some of those guys. I don't really know, but I think that affects my ranking for him a little bit, the org. You always ask me where's Cooper Jerpy? You talk about how come you hate Cooper Jerpy. You'd ask me like, you're the Cardinals fan. How come you aren't higher on Cooper Jerpy? I got him in my top 150 now. The strikeout rates are all there for Jerpy, so I'm finally putting him in there. I know you probably, you mentioned, I rank pitchers higher than you, so I'm going to have more pitchers in there. But Cooper Jerpy, 33.6 CSW last year, even though he only pitched 52 innings. So again, there's some reliever risk.
I think there's a lot of reliever risk in there. Yeah, that's my problem.
For sure. But the swing strike rate's there. He's going to strike a lot of dudes out. So either you've got, I think with the Cardinals, I think he's a closer at some point. If they trade Helsley at the deadline or something, then maybe Jerpy jumps in there and is a high leverage reliever for them. He could be a closer at some point. Just a thought there, but like I really don't like to rank relievers in my top 150. But if a guy still has a chance to be a starter or a reliever and it can kind of go either way, then I'm just going to lean on the strikeouts. So like that's why like someone like Teodo, someone like Jerpy, I'm okay like putting them in the top 150, because maybe even though they're gonna lean reliever, or it might be better to put them as a reliever, there's still like kind of like flippy floppy upside of them possibly starting.
Yeah.
So next you have at 129 Luis Perales. This is not a guy I have in my top 150, so I want to hear you talk about him for a second.
Well, Perales, I believe it was Tommy John. I believe that he had. I want to say that took him out, but prior to injury, 2.94 ERA and 9 starts in 2024, 56 strikeouts to 12 walks, big power pitcher stuff. He's been with the organization since 2021, but he had gotten up to AA. So you're also talking about a little bit of proximity. In 2 starts in AA, had a 1.23 ERA, walked 2, struck out 10, doing his stuff. Injuries kind of took away the season. Was at healthy, a top 100 prospect. I think some people didn't want to ding him even in the injury. I did ding him a little bit, but he's still a top 150 guy.
Yeah, he was fire for sure. 30.6 K minus walk rate in his 9 starts in the minors last year, pre-injury. So kind of he's your Owen Murphy. You're just putting the stamp. You'll wait.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So he's your Owen Murphy basically. But yeah, he was fire for sure. I have Hunter Barco here, who I think you and I have talked about a little bit, that we think he's kind of like underrated in the Pirate system. I like Hunter Barco better than Braxton Ashcraft. So like I would actually rank him like next after like Harrington out of all those Pirates pitchers. Because I I don't know. Who do you like better, Barco or Ashcraft? Because I think
I like
a little bit.
I like Ashcraft a tiny bit more, but it's also because like Ashcraft, everyone. I mean, Bubba Chandler, obviously Bubba Chandler, but like, don't be surprised when Ashcraft gets an opportunity here soon. So it's a little bit proximity, but I do like Barco long term. He was supposed to come to the AFL and didn't. Would have loved to have seen him, but I do like Barco a lot.
Yeah. 128, you have Blade Tidwell. I had him right outside of the top 50 as well. He was like between 150 and 160. Terrible year at AAA, but for whatever reason, the Mets pitchers, when they get to AAA, they all struggle. Like, I don't know what's up with Mets pitchers in AAA. Even like Christian Scott had some issues at AAA. I don't know. It's like, it's just AAA is just a mess. And I guess the Mets AAA is even bigger of a mess than like most other AAAs. There's a reason some teams just skip AAA in general. Sure. So, I don't know. I don't give too much credence to that. I care more about what he did before he got there. I actually had a podcast with John Anderson where we talked about like pitching stats. They flow a lot better from AA to the majors. Like, it makes more sense for pitchers to honestly just skip AAA in most instances, because like pitchers just get destroyed at AAA no matter where they're at. If they're in the PCL, if they're not in the PCL, they have ABS they're dealing with and all kinds of weird stuff. So, like, to be quite honest, it's probably better for the pitchers to just have them skip AAA because it's going to mess with them, and they're like, it'll mess with their mind at AAA. So I'm not really too concerned about his stats in AAA. And then right here we have Brock Wilken. I have Brock Wilken here. I think you have him slightly higher.
Yeah, I have him like the teens, 110, 115, something like that.
Yeah. So we still both believe in Brock Wilken enough that we have him in kind of the same range, 110 to 130 type range here. Where, you got smashed in the face, bad luck season. Like, we don't know how much that affected him mentally when he came back. Like, if you get smashed in the face, are you going to think, oh God, like any pitch high and tight is going to hit you in the face again? You're going to flinch instead of swinging. Like, it probably takes some time to come back from that. So I think we should give him a little bit of grace. He still had really good power numbers despite just like, poor contact skills. But I kind of agree with you that he's a name to still watch because the power is so good that I think he can bounce back.
Yeah, I got a good video of him if you want to check it out from the AFL, where you can just see like when he is on a pitch is absolute destruction of baseballs. It's just his pitch recognition kind of stinks right now. Maybe the tolls of the season got to him. Very interested to see how he looks early on in the year.
Yeah. Next, 127. You have Alejandro Rosario here. I had to red flag this one. I've got Jacob Melton here. Alejandro Rosario at 127. I have him ranked at 44, Welsh. Why do you hate Alejandro Rosario?
It's so funny too. I remember talking after, because he went to, I believe it was Miami, watching Miami, him at Miami. And I want to say there was a game I watched and it was like, maybe it was Victor Madreos or whatever his name was, but it was like against, Henry Davis. And, but Rosario, it just kind of balled out, and he was always on my radar. And then he just had the absolute breakout seasons. Again, another caveat, because we're using a little bit of an older list. We are higher with Rosario, but I am not with the other camp of the world. I believe Rosario belongs in the same discussion as Brennan Sprott. I'd throw Cade Horton in there. I still like Noble Meyer. Some people might argue that he belongs more in the discussion of the like Hagen Smith and Quinn Matthews and Socorro. I'm not like 100% there, but again, like credit where credit's due with what the Rangers have done with pitching development. There was a big negative on pitching development after Jack Leiter and Rocker both were stinking. It was like, whoa, this is not happening. And then there's been an absolute turnaround. Rosario, the phenomenal, ridiculous year that he had, ridiculous amount of strikeouts, sub-1 whip, super, super impressive. He is highlighted of a top 10 player that I want to focus on out here. Rangers are right down the street from me, of minor leaguers I want to have be a focal point that I need to see more of. Rosario is one of those. I put that in the same camp as like, he's top 100 in my new update, but it's not top 50. And I know some people are higher on that. I want to see like a tiny bit more in person. I want to see some of the zone control, but I do love everything the Rangers are doing. And I think that does speak really well. So like my rank looks lower, but again, I think from a perception standpoint, I'm probably not quite as far off from an SP ranks as some, but probably you, if you're top 50 overall on him.
Yeah, I've got him right around for pitchers. Tink Hence, Rhett Lauder, because I guess Lauder still is a prospect. Brandon Sprout. So I've got him like right, kind of like what you were saying around those guys.
I have him above Tink Hence, but I have Sprout and Rhett Lauder above him.
Yeah.
If that answers.
Okay. Yeah, it does. So Rosario, dude, the two seam fastball with a changeup is just insane. That's why, like, I love
It's
the like
ridiculous
I love
changeup.
that like it's just insane. So anyway, after Rosario, we have PJ Morlando. I know you're a big Morlando guy.
Yep.
I'm a little kind of out on him being in Miami where the power is not going to really play up. He's going to have a tough, like, he'll probably be in Jupiter this year. So I'll probably get to see him and maybe he'll grow on me because he got here and like got hurt like really fast. I think what did he play like 2 games or something like that. And he got hurt.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get to see him at the end of the season. So I'll probably get to see him. I've got Carson Bench here next to PJ Morlando. And then you have Josuar Gonzalez, the Dominican signee to the Giants, who I'm actually really interested in. I've got him like right outside of my top 150. Hard for me to put a Dominican dude who has not even played in Dominican Summer League yet that high. But like, I'll let you talk about him real quick. And the funny thing is, I've got Ethan Salas right next to him, and like, so we're going from like one of like the top signees to the other, like kind of like right next to each other here.
Yeah, I mean, going through it, people are torn. Like someone like Elian Pena is in the hit tool. Andrew Salas, Ethan Salas's brother, is in there. I wanted it to be Andrew Salas because I think he has some of the same representation of just like, you can see the maturity that's in the bat, but I don't think he's very explosive. And that's actually something that was kind of exposed with Salas, that even the whole family, Jose Salas, Ethan Salas, like there's an incredible bat speed. You just don't see incredible great bat control. Doesn't look like a super athlete, but he's probably more polished than anybody. So there's a floor there. I ended on Josuar Gonzalez because I just thought this is like an incredible bet on speed. Really fast guy. Bat speed looks like the generation of like the Ronald Acuna type of bat speed, which we know what that can do with overall power. And, there's a camp that's broken between Pena and him as far as what they like. It's funny. The fantasy community, I think, is going on Gonzalez a little bit more than Pena, simply because it looks like Gonzalez is going to be a massive runner. But I think I've been decently good in the international market as long as I've been doing this. Does not break my top 100. And that wasn't something that, like at the end of the day, the long term, I was right about Salas in that draft class where I was the only one that was like, he's the number one. And then all of a sudden, Ethan Salas within the next half year is top 20 overall prospect. But the wrong side, funny enough, is that he's come back down because like we're seeing a cap on it, but yet he's still like in the top 100-ish type of prospect. So all I'm getting at is like, even all of this said, I don't have him as a top 100 prospect. He didn't crack that. There are, give me Michael Leroy, give me all of those guys over him for sure. But there's like huge upside. Yeah,
for sure. I don't want this to be a 2-hour pod, so we're going to fly through some of these names here. So 124, you have Jaden Ham. We already talked, I had him just slightly lower. I have Ralphie Velasquez here. 123, you have Jonah Tong. I think I had him like 152, like right there. I have George Klassen here, who I think also has reliever risk because he has really great stuff, like phenomenal stuff. I saw him live this year. It's just the control is like way off. 122. I want to talk about this name real quick, Welsh. You have Arjun Namala at 122. I have him at 120. We both talked a lot of crap on him at the beginning of the year, but now we've both got him back here in like the same range. So you want to talk about Arjun Namala and the return of Arjun to us?
Well, the crap we talked was because people were going ballistic. It was like Namala is a top 50 prospect and this, that, and that thing. It was just like the hit tool looked like trash. And then they sent him back down to rookie ball. Well, guess what? The one thing he did was show off the super loud tools. And that's what we got to see on display. A little over 300 bats, 17 homers. The guy, again, like, whenever we can like have hyper focus on bat speed, that's something, especially with like, there's a couple things. If you're pairing a guy that really barrels the ball well with bat speed, that's going to be really good quality of contact. And you can maybe get away with size and stuff, Slade Caldwell. But then there's also guys that are physical specimens that have this just really big, crazy generated bat speed. That's something Sebastian Walcott had that we worried about with strikeout issues. And then the determination is like, all right, can they take this big physical presence with this really incredible bat that, upper, cut swing and is going to generate power? Can they hit it for contact? Sebastian Walcott answered the strikeout issues and the quality of contact with yes. Arjun Namala answered it with No. And he was sent back down. He did come back to it. He ended with a 232 batting average. He stole some bases, but he still struck out over 33% of the time, which is a problem. He doesn't walk a ton. He's got a long ways to go. Those are perfect outside the top 100 guys, or right around inside the top 100. He was just overvalued last year in my mind. I think you agreed, but I think, it's the porridge. It's just right now.
Yeah, he came back to it. Second half, 265, 331, 564 slash with 13 bombs. So pretty good for a young shortstop, young big shortstop.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have James Tibbs at 121 for you and Ryan Waldschmidt for me. And you've got Waldschmidt at 119. So we're really close on Waldschmidt here. You've got Caminiti at 120. And then moving up a little bit, I've got Wiesenhunt still at 119. Are you out on Wiesenhunt now, or do you still have him kind of like on the radar? I know we were both kind of like Wiesenhunt guys going to last year.
Radar, but I've moved him down. It's one of the best changeups I've ever seen in person. Absurd, absolutely absurd. But he's super inconsistent right now. And I don't know where that consistency is going to come. He's getting a little bit older, and I'm starting to worry that this is turning into relief risk. So I'm not out, because out would be like I pushed him outside the top 250. He's outside. I'm trying to remember. I think it's like 180 to 200. This year is going to be a huge determination of which step it's going to go. But that changeup, though, has the makings to me of like, look at like what we're doing with Chris Sanchez right now with Philly. It's like one of the best changeups, and the fastball is running, and now he's trying to add a cutter. And it's like, if Wiesenhunt could go that route, then watch the hell out, because I love the changeup, but I'm worried about some of the other stuff.
Another case of AAA being bad for pitchers, pitching in PCL for the whole year. That's not very fun for a pitcher.
Though it tells a story sometimes. Like, Zach Allen was a player that was able to absolutely dominate the PCL. And, but yeah, I mean, to your point, like, Brandon Pfaadt never like struggled crazy, but you saw some of the warts get exposed. But also, like, to your point, like confidence, like these guys, you don't want to decimate confidence and stuff like that. But, how do these guys build back up from getting blown up and stuff like that? And maybe it also opens up like, we need to fix something, like Taj Bradley got sent down last year because it was like, oh, this cutter is crap. And they cut it in he didn't have a feel for it, and they cut it in the minors, and they brought it back up and kind of rebuilt it. So maybe there's something to rebuild or PCL exposes with a guy like Wiesenhunt.
I would bet that the guys who actually succeed in the PCL have really good chase rates on their breaking pitches. Like, that'd be just like my guess.
Yeah.
So 118, you have Drake Baldwin. I've got him up at like 92 or something. So we're not too far apart on that.
Yep, but we're close.
Yeah. Henry Bolte, I've got at 118. I think you've got him, right here, 116. So we're really close on Bolte. I wanted to bring this one up, 117. I've got Davis and De Los Santos, but you have Seaver King at 117. I have Seaver King all the way up at like 70 something, 71. So tell me why I'm way too high on Seaver King.
Well, I need to see that there's more in the bat. Like where do you have Chandler? Where do you have Chandler Simpson?
I don't even have Chandler Simpson in my top 150. I think Seaver King has more power potential than Chandler Simpson, where Chandler Simpson just reminds me of Victor Scott way too much, even though they're like best friends. So it's like the easiest comp ever.
They are best friends. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I didn't mean to make it like he's going to be that guy, but I guess a little bit of exposed in that major league debut. No homers. He had 4 extra base hits of his 23 hits in that major league debut. He didn't strike out a bunch. You love. He walked some. You love. He stole a bunch of bases. Okay, I'm down with all this stuff. What's the hitting profile going to be? Right now, I think he's exposed, and this is a college bat. This is not like a high school guy. This is a college out of Wake Forest, which, by the way, Wake Forest is, Brock will put together like some really good hitters, but like where will the progression go? Is this simply a 5 to 10 homer guy that just kind of walks into it? If there's a good hitter environment for him to be in, if he were like with the Houston Astros, is he going to, chip some over the left field wall and stuff like that? I'm not sure. So right now, to me, it reads off of like, all right, cool. Maybe it's Xavier Edwards. I think that's my assumption. I'm not the biggest on Xavier Edwards this year in fantasy. I know some people are. He's at best, I think, a 3-category player. The problem is those 3 categories could be a lot better than it being given credit for. But is he a 4 homers, 35 stolen bases with a 280 average, a lot of runs, and he's devoid of homers and RBI? That's kind of the question. So that's why I think he just belongs in this territory and I'm not higher. And those answers or those questions might be answered here in the beginning of the year, where it's like, hey, there's a profile change, and this college bat has completely reworked this, and then 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 we'll come back to it because there are boxes that are checked. It's like, great, you don't strike out a bunch, you walk some, you're making good contact, but we're going to have to see how are you going to make it work? Are you going to be like CJ Abrams or Isak Paredes, and it's like, I don't barrel, I don't hit the ball hard, but I have a 18-degree launch angle, and I'm going to maximize that launch angle to home run potential in different ballparks, and I'm not sure that's there yet.
See, 16 homers in college says something. So I think that there is some power there. I don't think it's
metal bats, but yes.
Edwards. Yes. However, yes, metal bat and terrible batted ball profile last year. 54% ground ball rate, only 21% fly ball rate. So to your point, I think it's a swing adjustment that needs to be made. But he did show some power in the minors, in college. So I think it could be in there. They just have to unlock it. And that's why I'm higher on him. But maybe I am a little too high. 117 is still like a pretty decent ranking.
No, but again, go back to the whole thing, man. It's just like it's all kind of relative. Like if you don't want to have those big swings, because I could foresee people being super annoyed with like, okay, buddy, you can't have like 70 people that are the same. It's like, okay, well, put them in buckets. Put them in buckets of like 30 or 40. So it's like having him at 80 versus 110. It's like that's pretty relative to it. Obviously, you have to make a statement to it. Like you had to do it when you did your 150. You're like, well, I want to put Gavin Cross there because I just want to show him there because you're doing a numerical end. If you were doing 300, would you put him at like 150? You might not. You might not,
or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't focus on it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So 116, you have Henry Bolte. We already talked about him. I have Emil Morales. And riddle me this, Welsh. Why is everyone so obsessed with Jesus Mate, but not Emil Morales, when he did very similar things in the DSL? I understand the swing strike rate was like 29% for him, which is atrocious, but he still had 12 steals and 14 bombs with a 194 WRC plus in DSL this year.
Well, I have him inside my top 100, so that's why we're not talking about him. Emil Morales.
There we go.
Yeah, he's inside. I think I have him at 82 on my ranks right now. So I'm with you on that. There's a camp, man. I don't want to do the Jesus. We've already gone long here. I don't want to do it, but like Jesus Mate, it's Dominican summer stats and some of the underlying data, obviously, that some people have from the Brewers is generating a buzz that is a berserko. When I get the P1 ADPs done, you can guarantee he's going to go in the top 30. I don't even think it's a question. And that shows
someone's going to DeVries him and pick him at 7.
I wouldn't be shocked if he went into that. And to your point, it's like, well, Morales, 14 homers, 12 stolen bases, 342 average in the Dominican Summer League. He's also very physically impressive. There's a strikeout problem out there. Guess what? I'm going to get to see him in days now because he is here stateside and he is going to be with the minor league camp with the Dodgers. So I'm going to get some boots on the ground as well as Jesus Mate. And I'll have an idea. But yeah, I agree. Like Mate at 20 and Morales outside the top 100 doesn't quite equate to me, but I don't have him for us to talk about because I have him inside my top 100.
Yeah, there we go. Team Morales, baby. 115, Sal Stewart, Sean Sullivan. We've talked everybody's ears off about Sean Sullivan in the past. 114, Yanquiel Fernandez and Braylor Guerrero. You're the Guerrero guy. Am I too low or too high on Guerrero?
Because where do you have him? You got him at 114. No, I think that's that's the wheelhouse. I have him higher. I've got Braylor higher. I loved again what he was able to do in those short stints. I have him right around Emil Morales. So you have the same general range, but I have Guerrero like 2 spots higher. Bunch of stolen bases. He hit 330. He did it on complex side, state side. And I think there's a ton more power in the bank. He only hit 2. I am worried about that because I love the hitting profile. Hit 330 on state side. So I've got Guerrero just a couple spots higher than Morales. So I'm with you. It's fine.
I love the hitting profile too. If he was healthy, I probably would. If he like finished the season healthy and hit Aceball like he was trending to before the injury, I'd probably have him higher.
Totally.
113. You have Justin Crawford. I have Eduardo Quintero here. I marked this red because Crawford I have, I think, in the 60s. So is this just rabbit fear here, or what are your thoughts on Crawford at 113 here?
I think he's in this same general range as like Enrique Bradfield. He did hit for a little bit more power. The average was way up, which was like really big positive thing to see with Justin Crawford. I love that he hit for average at AA. So I think Crawford is on the move up. I do think there's still a few more questions to be answered by doing it again this year from a power perspective to be like, holy crap, he's going to be a 1540 guy or he's going to be CJ Abrams statistically. But I do think he answered a lot of that. He is a little bit higher in the update that's coming up than what we're talking about. But what did you say you have him?
I have him actually at 53.
Okay, yeah. So I'm not like, that close by any means, but he's right in that like general 100 range.
My comp for him is a taller Juan Pierre. I don't know if you like
that. Yeah, I like that. But I see the thing that's interesting about him is like he might be floating around the possibility of like, oh, he actually might be more of a power threat than we were giving credit to before because he just hit 9 homers. But we'll see. Yeah. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah. Hopefully, Carl Crawford did it. He had some insane seasons. 112, Chase McDermott, Parker Messick. So we have some like close pitchers here. 111, you have a Dale Amador. I think I've got Amador like right inside the top 100. So we're pretty close on Amador. Pretty rough first half of the season. Went up to the majors, was terrible. Went back down, got better when he went back down. So if anyone's out on Amador, I think he's still like a decent bargain for maybe like points leagues. I don't know. I just don't know if like the speed and power is really there. Like, is he just like a Justin Wilson, like a worse Justin Wilson or something?
I have him in the update. It's lower. He's lower for me, just FYI.
Okay. Here is your Brock Wilken. I've got Colson Montgomery. Where do you have Colson Montgomery? I feel like I'm like the super low guy on him now. Everyone's like, oh, he had a 114 max EV. It's like, unless you're doing that, unless you're hitting consistently with that kind of power, I don't really care. I think his average EV was still like 87 and his 90th still wasn't even that great. So I'm like, I mean, like, so, I know you see him, you've seen him, so it probably is going to judge it a little bit. But
well, he had a wrist injury.
He's better in fall league too. He was better.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for me. I've got him inside the top 50. So we're big different on that. He was dealing with a wrist injury in season. I think that like re-injured, that became kind of a big topic. He got healthy. He missed a lot of time last year, went to the Arizona Fall League, was like a new player. He had these massive strikeout issues. I think I had noted this. Over the first 2 weeks of the AFL, he did not have, I think he had 1 strikeout the whole time. And then, by the way, the minute I tweeted that, the first game in the 3rd week, he struck out like 3 times in that game. But he was making better contact, better decision, hitting off-speed stuff, more confident than ever. I got tons of video on him, fell back in love, and I think he made the improvement. I made excuses for him in the first AFL. I was like, oh, don't worry, he's just, he missed time, he's trying to be aggressive, whatever, and that seemed to be wrong. And I didn't have to make those this time because he looked like a brand new player. So I'm very optimistic. Plus, there's proximity in it. So I've got him inside the top 50.
Yeah, I like a couple of years ago, I was really high on him. I think I had him in like the 30s or something a couple of years ago. He's been like one of my bigger droppers. And I think it's just been like lack of consistency. But
yeah, well, he's needed to show his ability to, he's needed to start to hit off speed stuff. Go and look. There's a video that I got. I think it was a 2-homer day that he had, but he crushes this breaking pitch at Peoria. And I'm like right there. And it's like he almost hits the camera well on Peoria's center field, which is like, it's a big green wall up top. It's a crazy homer. And I think it was a good representation of some off-speed hitting as well. White Sox, like, fan accounts and whatever, like 35th on everybody was like so excited about that video because it was like, oh, this isn't just him like murdering fastballs. Like he's doing some other stuff.
Yeah. Good. You have Jacob Melton here. I already had him at 109. I've got Termar here. We're both still kind of in on Termar. 108. You got Nacho. I like
Nacho's
that.
Nacho's lower, but he's not that much lower. But that is a proximity play. He still is in this top 50. I want to point out, but again, it's a little messy right here on what's to look. But like you were going to note, 10 homers, 26 stolen bases, incredibly great hitting profile. Just needs opportunity. I think he's one of those guys that like. Absolute prospect fatigue. No one gives a crap about him anymore. He gets an opportunity. Unfortunately, he might be blocked for a little bit. Then we might see that like pretty exciting hit tool come back into play. And again, he stole some bases.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he had a brief little call up, but it's like, he's definitely blocked. So he needs an injury really to play.
Yeah, exactly. Or a trade.
Yeah, exactly. Harlan Susana for me here at 108. Are you higher on Susana? You got him in the top 100?
No, I've got him like he's one of those I struggle with, and I saw him when he was a Padre and stuff like that. I've got him right outside the top 150. So, I've got a bank of some of the guys we've talked about, like Logan Henderson, who they're super high on. Teodo, Tidwell, all the names that, I've got them higher, but I know that like there's a lot of exciting stuff. There's always a little bit of relief risk, especially in the early days. This is a prime example of a player though, that I get mentally skewed a little bit when I see these guys in person a bunch. And I have this representation of Susana when he was a Padre that's kind of floating in my head, that we haven't seen like insane dramatic change that's happened. So there's still a little bit of part of me that's like, all right, like, is he going to be like a big strikeout guy? But like, it is working in the wrong direction. This might be one that I end up being like wrong on, that I don't have him higher right now. But it's like, also, how many damn pitchers can we have? It's like everybody in the world loves Ryan Sloan. It's like there's new pitchers that came into the market. Everybody is the biggest, Yoniel Curret with Tampa Bay fan. Like Thomas Harrington is like 75 pitchers that everybody wants to say is a top 50 pitcher. It's tough to pick your spots.
There's a ton of them. And then you get a Brian Wu who comes out of nowhere and
yeah, exactly. And walks 2.9 per 2.8 per 9.
107, you've Drew Gilbert. I've got Gilbert right outside the top 150. I have Edwin Arroyo. 106, you have Ronnie Mauricio. Yes, he's still a prospect, right?
I want him to go away. I want him to desperately go away.
Yeah, I know. He's been around forever. I've got Kevin Alcantara with the Cubbies. 105, you have Luis Baez. I have Alejandro Osuna, who had a really nice fall league. 104, you have Cam Collier. We talked about him. I've got Zach DeZenzo. Very similar players, actually. Kind of funny. As far as like profile. 103, we both have Braylon Payne at 103.
Oh, same. Look at us.
And the reason I have him there is because of you, because you were the very end of the season when we were doing P1. You were talking him up. It was like the last, or maybe this the last week or the 2 weeks before the end of the season. You told me, you're like, this guy is amazing. He was so electric when I saw him. And like, I've been high on him ever since then. And then he had a small little sample size where he killed it at Aceball after you told me about him. So that it was before that little sample size when you told me how excited you were about him because you saw him in Bridge League. So
yeah, he was weird
right here.
He was so weird because I remember I hated the pick. I'm like, who the hell is Braylon Payne? What is this? What are the Brewers doing? I went on CBS. I was on CBS television, and I graded. I was like, Brewers, not a class that I like. I didn't like a lot of what they did. But after getting to see, again, this is like, you watch a video, and I was like, I don't know. But then you see him in person, and you're like, man, he's leading off. Bat is always in the zone. It's very across your body. So this would be another one of those, like the Bradfields and stuff of like, where's the power going to be? I'm not 100% sure, but he's a doubles hitter and he is an aggressive base stealer and he gets on base. So it's like it checked all of those boxes. 18 years old, maybe there's cherry picking and giving him credit where you don't give some other people credit on being able to hit for some contact. But I also think, part of me that thinks this might be a 50 stolen base plus guy at the major leagues, and he hits at the top of an order and he scores 100 runs. Like, that's how impressive he was. He's got kind of an edge to him. He hit, like you said, like 400 and whatever couple games that he had in the majors. It's a very, very interesting profile. I'm very excited to see him in camps and see like what has progressed. But yeah, he was kind of a unknown-ish type of guy, and he shined in the Bridge League, which no one got to see stats of. And I do have a few videos, I think, out there if you want to check on my X Twitter.
Yes. And then 102, you have Slade. We talked about him. I have a Kedry Vargas, who is traded to the Marlins. And then 101, you have the password Yastinson Garcia, and I have Thomas Harrington. Anything you want to say on any of these other top guys before we round out the pod here?
No, I mean, Garcia's is kind of tough to gauge sometimes, but 23 homers, 17 stolen bases, hit really well. Maybe like he was able to move through the system, which I think is really positive because he's a little bit older, but 263 in AA, big counting stats. I think he's super fascinating. It's a group of some fascinating guys. Like I said, I do have some changes specifically in that probably 1 to 125 range comparative to what looks like here. But Garcia is a guy that still sits in this general vicinity, and it's pretty fascinating, man.
Yeah, he's interesting. So basically, if you look at his numbers, something I noticed, he's got kind of like an Isaac Paredes type profile. 46% fly ball rate and a 46% pull rate with a 30% home run to fly ball rate. Pull ball, hit ball in air, equal home run. That's the equation right there.
Sometimes math is easy, and that math is pretty easy.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that is the top 150 for you, from me, from the Welsh. And Welsh, what else you have going on, bud?
Too much, man. I've been a disaster to deal with. I'm usually not a headache, but all of that is because it's like the insanity of the season that's going on. I'm over on Fantasy Pros. We are in the heart of draft season. Some people know I was doing football. We got the Super Bowl this week as we're recording this, but we got massive amounts of killer content and get you on a Fantasy Pros video here soon. We're doing videos and the podcast. So Fantasy Pros, youtube.com/Fantasy Pros MLB if people want to check out that. In this league going on, Prospect One, top 500 prospects. Got the Patreon with the Dynasty and Prospect list if people want to check it out. It's all the same stuff. I already said it all, so it's dumb to even be like, but instead of setting it all, just follow my Twitter. But yeah, that's like the thing. Like I tweet out the stuff that I do. As in the beginning of the episode we discussed, I'm not really putting it all anywhere else. It is just all on Twitter. I'll do Patreon stuff. I'll do Fantasy Pros, Prospect One in this league. It all happens kind of on the Twitter. So if you follow me there, you're in good space. That's it.
Yes. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple, stupid. Exactly.
There we go. All right. And you can find all my rankings also on the Fantasy Pros and also, again, on the Twitter. I've been posting everything on there. So P1ADP, Welsh, when is it happening?
Oh, man, my goal was going to be this week, but as you know, because you haven't received a message from me about it, because you clearly would, that I have not set up the invites. My trick here, and this is why I wanted to do it, is we're doing a company Fantasy Pros trip to Las Vegas next week. There's no chance I will be able to do anything from Vegas next week. I wanted to get it started by the end of the weekend. There's still a possibility. So here are the two fronts. It could literally start up in a couple days, or it'll happen right when I get back from Vegas, which is the middle of February, which would then line up for the ADPs to come out sometime between the end of February and March and have some accompanying episodes with it. Top 200 prospects. I do have all the old data. We have the last P1 ADP that's there. If people want to check it out, but boy, have there been changes for everybody. So P1 ADP is happening soon. Mr. Tim Kanak, of course, will be a part of it. And then hopefully we'll have all the data to talk about after the fact.
All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace out, everybody. We'll see you next time.